welcome to episode 168 of the CRICKETher Weekly. As you can see, we are at Worcester. It's the aftermath of the final and Vipers have just won yet another trophy. And it was pretty easy going for them in the end, wasn't it, Sid, against the Blaze today after the resumption, with Blaze being 4 down overnight with 50 odd on the board.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the Vipers players right now are up on the balcony behind us, and they're celebrating this music and cheering, and they're clearly absolutely delighted with it. They're not getting bored of winning trophies anytime soon. Yeah, I mean, the game in a sense was over at the point that we left the field yesterday, wasn't it? And there was a lot of confusion though, wasn't there, yesterday? Because at the point we left the field, we didn't even know there was going to be a reserve day, did we, Raf?
Yeah, correct. You were going around telling people, including the whole of Twitter, that actually if they didn't get back on, then Blaze were going to win, because we thought that it was if you finished top of the group stages, then you automatically got the trophy. And then suddenly we became aware that there was a reserve day, and so it was on the phone to the nearest Premier Inn to scrabble around trying to find somewhere, because once the second thunderstorm came, I think we all realised that no, we weren't going to be getting back on yesterday. And to be honest, I have to say, enormous credit to everyone here at Worcestershire for actually getting the final back on today, because as we understand it, the ground staff were up really early this morning after having the night to try and dry the ground out. They were out there really early in doing a mopping up operation essentially, and there was still a question mark about whether it was going to get played today, whether we were going to be able to resume. Obviously in some respects the Blaze fans may have been hoping that it didn't, because they weren't resuming in a very good situation. But I just want to say thank you to the Worcestershire ground staff, because we definitely have had situations within a few years, as recently as a few years ago, where ground staff would have gone, oh well, it's just a women's cricket match and we're not bothered, and that absolutely was not the case today. And you know, everybody coming back today was also really well looked after from a media perspective. It's expensive to have a reserve day. I believe this is the first ever finals day, domestic final in England, where it's ever gone to a reserve day, and the arrangements were put in place rapidly and with great success. So I think we should be saying a really big thank you. And the most important thing perhaps about getting back out there today was that it let Anya Shrubsole finish her career for Southern Vipers in style, because what an anticlimax it would have been if Blaze had won the trophy and Anya Shrubsole hadn't been able to bowl her final over today, and that just would have been a not a great way to finish her career. But instead she got to go out there, play one more time, and take home one more trophy and win the Player of the Match award as well.
Yeah, the Player of the Match award. I mean, in some ways, if you're Danny White, you're looking at that and going, hello, I smashed 50 runs off 30 balls. Me, but she's not going to be doing that today. We were speculating, obviously, when Anya led the team onto the field yesterday, that led to the speculation that this might be her last game, so that turned out. She confirmed that in the post-match announcements. She was in tears as she was announcing it, and I'm not going to lie, I was sitting up there in the press area, and there was a tear rolling down my cheek as well, because I mean she's just such a fantastic person, yeah. And she's such a sort of selfless person, and she just gives so much, and I do hope that she remains within the game, and that this won't be the last we see of her completely, because she's such a valuable person to have as part of the game, and her passion and her commitment. But it's more than anything, it's like her modesty, and on that, actually, I just did a quick interview with her after the match, and I said to her, when did you decide that you were going to retire, and when did you tell the girls? And she said, oh, it's sort of been a slow process throughout this season. I've just been in a bit more pain, and I decided that it was time. And I told the girls on Friday, because it just felt like I needed to tell them ahead of finals day, and I did not expect them to make it so obvious. And that shows that she is the kind of person who, she didn't want a fuss, she didn't want any of this hoo-ha, and I think she was quite taken aback by people picking up on this fact that it was her last game. She would rather, almost in a way, of it just have gone under the radar, and as you say, she was struggling with those emotions in the post-match interview, because I think she was a bit surprised that people were actually bothered about it in a kind of, oh, but it's just
I already retired from England, and this is just the kind of natural end of my career. And because she is a modest person, and I think that showed it. But I'm really glad that the team did make a fuss of her and did get her to lead them out onto the field that last time, and did make it obvious, because I think that meant that she's got the headlines now that she deserves. And of course we are going to see her playing in the 100, and that's going to be kind of, even more exciting in a way, and there will be a lot of hype then around her last match. But it was actually kind of really nice to be here in a sort of slightly retro, not many people here, kind of quite low-key moment, but still to be here to say that we were at the end and we saw Anya Shrubsole's last ever outing in a Viper shirt. Especially nice for you, Sid, as a kind of long-term Vipers fan, hey?
Yeah, and I've been watching Anya for a long time, and she's always been very committed to the team she's played for. She carried on playing for Somerset for years and years. There was ECB pressure for her to move to a different side because they wanted her to be playing for a Div 1 side back in the days of the old Kent Championship, when the County Championship was divided into several divisions. She always resisted that pressure, and she eventually, after professionalisation, came over, when she finished with England, came over to Vipers and took this player coach role, and has really kind of owned that role. And it's, I have no more words about it, Raf. But what about the Blaze? Let's talk a bit about the Blaze, because there were a few emotions there as well. Kirsty Gordon, stood up in the post match, and exactly as you would expect, she was like, full credit to the Vipers. They were the better side on the day, but she was clearly kind of fighting back the tears herself, I think.
I had a bit of a chat.
tough day for her and for that team after a fantastic season.
Yeah, I did manage to have a bit of a chat to her as well, and as you say, she had been crying a bit. I think it's a tough one to take for her as captain, after them having been so dominant in the group stages, to then come out and feel like they really hadn't given a very good showing in the final. And I think that's it. It's, you can have finals where you're just outplayed by a better team. But you can also have finals, and I think this one was an example of that, where you just don't really give your best, and you just don't really show what you're about as a unit. And the Blaze have not been so dominant in this competition by playing like they played today in the final. That isn't how they've been batting, and it was just quite odd the way they totally went into their shells with the bat. And they must have known coming out today, 50 odd for 4, with halfway through their innings, with 10 overs left to actually put a decent total on the board. They needed to get to 150. If they had got to 150, then with those few Vipers wickets falling at the end, they could have put real pressure on them. But they just lost it with the bat, and after that power play with Maya and Danny Wyatt, it was just not going to happen. So I think that partly Kirsty Gordon's upset because she feels that they didn't kind of put their best foot forward. But I think it is also a learning experience, and ultimately the reason that Vipers won is because they know how to play finals. They know how to play finals days. And yesterday in the semi-final against the Thunder, they were so calm. And then in the final, and then with the disrupted final, it just didn't seem to faze them at all. They know what they're doing. They know how to play in a finals day, and teams like the Blaze and the Thunder, this is a new experience for them. And so I do think that there is something to be said in just kind of going, okay, well, we'll put this one up to experience, and we'll put a brave face on it, and we'll look to thinking about future finals day. We've still got the final of the Rachel Hayhoe Trophy to come this season, and then there'll be plenty more future seasons.
Yeah, I wonder, do you think, we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but are we seeing evidence today of that the winning the ladder stages in these kind of finals days we're seeing where there's only one semi-final, winning the ladder stages, is that looking increasingly like it's a poison chalice? Because Vipers were able to come out yesterday and against Thunder, Thunder at the end of their innings, Thunder yesterday were going at 9 and over. They were, and yet they were going at 9 and over, and it was slipping away from them because the Vipers had been able to kind of assert some authority and go, look, even though Thunder played really well, we totally owned that anyway. So Vipers were on such a roll of confidence going into that last game, and have we really seen that actually finishing second or third is a bit of an advantage?
Well, I think it's difficult to say. I do think that yesterday for Vipers it was handy having played in that semi-final because they did look a lot more kind of sort of tuned in to the conditions. So that obviously does create a certain level of advantage. But I still stick with what I just said. I think that for Vipers it's about having been at finals day before and knowing that the pressure and being able to deal with that and and just being so calm in how they went about it. I mean, you know, Maya Boucher and Danny Wyatt at the top of the order, just not a trace of nerves anywhere to be seen. And that's impressive. I think some of that comes from the top, some of that comes from having a coach who's very calm, and an assistant coach who's pretty calm and knows what she's about. And as you've said, like, let's hope that they retain the services of Anya Shrubsole, because she's given such a lot to this team and such a lot to cricket, and we really need people like her in our sport, I think. Anyway, so finals day, you're happy, Sid?
Yeah. I mean, I do feel sorry for the Blaze, because it's, you know, it's a cruel world where you win the group stages so emphatically, including obviously beating the Vipers because they beat everybody, and then, you know, you don't walk away with a trophy. But that's the way the system is set up. You need to deal with the pressure of finals day, and at the end of the day, they just weren't able to do that. They really need to come out this morning, all guns blazing, as I wrote in my piece. Pun completely intended, and you know, they just didn't do that. And you know, it looks like Marie Kelly was told to try and anchor the innings and for everyone else to try and bat around her, and she looks like she did her job. I mean, I haven't spoken to them, but that you know, from afar, that looks like what they were trying to achieve, and the people around her just didn't kind of do the more aggressive role that they were supposed to play, and so it just didn't work out for them. And at the end of the day, I mean, they did make the expected total from where they were. You know, you'd kind of pretty much double your total and add 6 or 7 after, you know, from your 10 over total to the end of it, and it just wasn't enough, as we know. Anyway, so but a wonderful day for the Vipers, and they're still celebrating. I can still hear the songs being sung.
Now, one team who won't be celebrating after the back end of the Charlotte Edwards Cup competition are the Sunrisers, who finished bottom of the table. Unfortunately, a spot in points tables where they are familiar with being. And there was a very strange thing that happened a few days ago, Sid. It was exactly 90 minutes before the start of their final Charlotte Edwards Cup group game. The result was irrelevant because Sunrisers were already out of it, and they announced just suddenly that they were changing captain, and that Kelly Castle's services as captain were being dispensed with, and that they were bringing in Dane van Niekerk to captain for that final game, and presumably for the Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy when that resumes after a couple of weeks break. Yeah, it was all very strange, Sid, and one has to reflect and think that all is not happy within the Sunrisers camp at the moment.
No, I mean, okay, so I mean, just on the subject of the way that it was announced, I mean, the fact that it was announced so quickly to the game, I mean, it's clear that it was not a decision that anybody had necessarily thought very much about. There's clearly been some sort of incident or issue, you know, and such a last-minute change, you know, with one game to go in the tournament, and it was an irrelevant game from their perspective. It was still relevant from Viper's perspective, it was relevant from their perspective, and to do that, it's just like, it just feels like the whole thing's been, you know, whoever's responsible for the management there, unfortunately, has not done their job, because, you know, at the end of the day, the management is responsible for things like, you know, these things working smoothly, right? So, you know, if we got to the end of the Charlotte Edwards Cup campaign and they'd left it a week and then they'd gone, okay, after reflection, you know, Kelly Castle has decided to step down from the captaincy and we've decided to appoint Dane van Niekerk for the end of the season. You know, that's the way that you do things, you know, in a proper way. You know. And I'm going to be upfront here, because I said on this podcast, you know, a few months ago that I didn't think that Kelly Castle should be Sunrisers captain. I thought that she should have been asked to step down quietly, you know, over the winter break, and they should have made Grace Scrivens captain at that point. You know, that appeared like the right move at the time. But given where we are, you know, they obviously decided not to make that decision. That's totally their prerogative, and you can certainly argue that was a reasonable decision. I mean, Grace hasn't had a great season. Obviously, things could have been different if she'd been the captain, but she hasn't had a great season. But, you know, once you've made that decision that this is our captain, to end up in a situation where that captaincy is being changed 90 minutes before a game starts, that's not a good position for the management to have got themselves in. And however that situation has come about, and we have no inside information, we're not keeping anything back from you guys here. There honestly is no inside information, but however that situation has been arrived at, it shouldn't have been arrived at that, and the management needs to take some responsibility for that, because it always feels like with, you know, the management are the ones that kind of can just swan through this. You know, the managers aren't the ones losing their jobs over this. and that just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing from a kind of external perspective looking in is the fact that it does strike you as very shoddy treatment of somebody who is one of your established senior professionals. That is not the way to treat somebody who is kind of one of the backbones of your team. And as you say, to do that in a way that actually I can't think that this is what would have been chosen by Kelly Castle. I cannot think that this is how she would have chosen to step down from the captaincy.
Absolutely not.
And therefore that suggests that that it's been done kind of almost
something else has happened.
Yeah.
Something has happened.
Yeah. And the other thing is that's a bit weird. I mean, we can say all we like. Oh, Danae van Niekerk has been a great captain for South Africa, a great captain at international level, and she has an enormous amount of captaincy experience to bring to the table. And that's all well and good. So of course,
true.
Yeah. So of course you use that on the field. In your Sunrisers matches, and they have certainly been utilising her. She's been moving the field around. It's been very obvious that she's been playing a large role in that. But the captaincy isn't just an on-field position, the captaincy is also an off-field position. And it doesn't make any sense, really, to have your captain as somebody who isn't going to be here over the winter. And we don't even know what her contractual situation is in terms of, is she going to be here for the whole of the Rachel Hayhoe Flynn? Obviously she's going to be here for the 100, that's a big payday for her. Over the winter she's then going to want to go and play in WBBL, in the Women's Premier League in India. And so
Caribbean
she's not
Premier League is also another option.
So she's not going to be around to do the kind of off-field stuff for the Sunrisers that you really need her to be doing. And so it's just such a strange decision. It doesn't really make any sense from a kind of team management perspective.
It's a very short-term decision driven, and I agree that on the field it makes sense. And Dana has been a successful captain for South Africa, and she was successful at the Invincibles. But bringing together the Invincibles for a few weeks in a franchise competition is a very different proposition as a captain to kind of repairing a damaged regional outfit, which is much more of a long-term thing. And as you say, she's almost certainly not going to be there over the winter because, quite rightly, from her perspective, she'll be chasing those other gigs.
Yeah.
And honestly, chasing the dollar, because that's what she needs to do to make sure that she puts herself in the right situation to, go forward with her life once her career is finished. So, she's going to make those decisions, and then, the Sunrisers are going to have to make more and different decisions back here. But if they're seeing it just as a stopgap, and it's going to in September they're going to make an additional announcement, then that's probably where we're going to go. Because let's face it, they're going to have to make another announcement anyway at some stage. Dana van Niekerk is not a long-term solution here, you would imagine, unless she's planning to take up some sort of player coach role, a la Anya Shrubsole, which I mean is a possibility, I suppose. But I think that
it just doesn't seem to have been thought through.
Yeah.
As you say, it's not a decision that's been made for the long term. And really, Sunrisers need to be thinking strategically. How do we get ourselves away from this position of always finishing last? And this is not something that's being done strategically. This just feels like it just smacks of very short-term thinking, and that's not what Sunrisers need. So, I guess they need to sort themselves out a bit. It sounds harsh, but that's what they need to do. Okay, Sid, we have, moving away from regional cricket for a minute, we know that the England Women's Ashes squad is being announced actually tomorrow, so on Monday. So this time tomorrow, roughly speaking, we'll know who is in the, I guess they'll have a separate test squad, but they might possibly announce the ODI and the T20 squads at the same time. So we will know who is going to be facing Australia in the Ashes in just a couple of weeks' time. Very exciting. So I'm going to ask you, Sid, do you think that we're going to see any surprises? In particular, let's think about that test squad. Any surprises?
Well, I don't think any surprises are very likely for me. I think that there are definitely some openings that could come later in the series for me, and I think it's definitely possible that Danny Gibson in particular, she has to make an England debut this year, you'd have thought, whether that's in the Ashes or later on in the September series against Sri Lanka. But I think that one's coming. But I think that the selections are likely to be probably more conservative for the test. I guess the other big question mark in terms of selections is someone that is not a debutant, but are they going to select Izzy Wong? That's a really interesting question. Izzy Wong's been literally on the side of Tower Bridge this week. The ECB put a huge projection onto Tower Bridge, and Izzy Wong was up there. She's in all the marketing materials, and yet her form out here on the field,
not just at Worcester, all grounds,
has been not good. And honestly, on form, she doesn't merit a place in the squad. But are the selectors, are Heather Knight and Jonathan Lewis, going to be under pressure from the marketing department to include Izzy Wong, even though her form hasn't been great?
Yeah, it's a tough question. I guess one of the other questions that's maybe been settled this week by a particular intra-squad match. We don't have the whole scorecard available to us, but Lancashire put out a tweet, didn't they, saying that Emma Lamb had made, 197 opening the batting for one of those intra-squad sides. So if you're asking who's going to be opening the batting for England in the Test, I'd say she's put down a fair marker for herself. She did open in the Test last year against South Africa, so I suppose she's kind of in sort of the incumbent, if you like, but we don't really have incumbents in women's Tests because they're not played often enough. So I would think though that innings is probably sealed her spot, but the rest of it is potentially up for grabs. I'm a bit like you. I think that if there are going to be any sort of new faces, then they're much more likely to play them in the T20 leg of the series, and Danny Gibson is the obvious candidate, having been the reserve for the World Cup. You did have a few, you'd done your 2 Charlotte Edwards Cup rankings pieces though, Sid. Was there anyone else from either of those 2 pieces who you think perhaps might merit selection based on performances in this competition? Yeah,
I mean, for me, the one person that you might want to look at, and I don't think that this is necessarily the right decision, but you might want to look at Grace Hall. That's because she offers something a little bit different. So there's a couple of reasons for potentially looking at her. She is a right arm medium pacer, but she's got this sort of very round arm, slingy, malingerish action.
Do you like that? That was for all people who are listening audio only. I just did my very basic demonstration of Grace Hall's extremely slingy action.
Yeah, I'm not sure she makes that noise when she barks. That was perhaps a little unfair to her.
No, it feels like her arms sort of whirl round like a helicopter, so I was making the helicopter noises.
Okay. I think that she does offer something different because she's got a very good Yorker, and she'll kind of bring it slightly into the batsman or batter, at a Yorker length, and that makes it awkward coming from such a low trajectory. It's kind of the opposite of facing a Lauren Bell or a Mahika Gur. So there's a possibility there. It would also kind of throw the cat among the pigeons in terms of Australians, what the Australian analysts and things are working on in the next 2 weeks. You throw her in, suddenly the Australian coach and skipper are telling their analysts to go and spend 3 days looking at every
play.
Yeah. Looking at every delivery she's delivered in the Charlotte Edwards Cup and trying to work her out, and that obviously takes their attention away from other things. So there might be a bit of mind games in doing something like that as well. You never know.
Okay, well, we'll find out this time tomorrow, along with everybody else. And I guess next week will be a full-on Ashes preview ahead of the Test. It's coming up on us quickly, Sid. But for now, you're going home happy, Vipers are going home happy, and we'll see you in a week's time. Bye.
Bye.